Welcome to Cinecynics.
I'm Craig.
I'm Mark.
And now watch before your very eyes as we make this entire show disappear.
Not really. Thanks to the successful funding of its Kickstarter campaign, the Veronica Mars movie has now been greenlit.
This is pretty exciting for Veronica Mars fans. I have not actually seen the show, but this could mean a lot of good things for other cult classic TV shows that were short-lived to finally get made into a movie or get made back into a TV show. But Kickstarter was originally started for people who had a passion for something that they wanted to make independently but didn't have the funds to do so. And I think this might be bursting the bubble for Kickstarter if Hollywood is going to get in there and it's going to become so mainstream that people who are in the lower echelon of Kickstarter are never going to be able to get their Kickstarter's campaigns made.
Another interesting thing to note is that Kickstarter may now become a source of frustration to directors and creators of cult-status TV series who have since moved on in their careers to other projects. Along that lines, fans of the sci-fi western Firefly have begun to ask Joss Whedon if a similar Kickstarter might allow him to make another movie. And though he's flattered by this idea, he's basically in contract with Marvel for the next 3-4 years, and he hasn't even been able to get his Dr. Horrible 2 web series off the ground.
I would be really excited for there to be another Firefly movie. I mean, yes, as a fanboy, it's super exciting to me, but he's not gonna do it just because of how much more money it's gonna cost than the Veronica Mars Kickstarter would even cost. So just this idea of there being a Firefly movie is kind of stupid. The TV show that I would love to see get a Kickstarter campaign to make a movie into would be Jericho. That was way less of a budget because it's not sci-fi, and most of the effects on the show were done practically. So, I don't know, I'd rather see a Jericho Kickstarter than a Firefly Kickstarter at this point. And it's just recently been reported that Ridley Scott wants Christian Bale to play Moses in his biblical epic, Exodus.
I'm really curious to see what happens with this project. I think Christian Bale would be perfect in this role, and the biblical movie isn't exactly something that's foreign to Christian Bale, as he did play the role of Christ in Mary, Mother of Jesus, in a made-for-television movie in the late 90s. I also think it's exciting that with the History Channel's The Bible and also Noah forthcoming from Darren Aronofsky, that there's been a resurgence in the Sword and Sandal biblical epic that we've seen from the 50s and 60s, like Ten Commandments, King of Kings, Ben-Hur, and Quo Vadis. And I think that Ridley Scott is the perfect director to take up that mantle. Jurassic Park 4 has found its director, the relatively unknown Colin Trevorrow.
I really think this is a good choice for Jurassic Park 4. He has such a great imaginative eye, and he can bring such deep emotion to his characters through his direction. And I think he did a great job with Safety Not Guaranteed. It had such a great story and characters in it, and I absolutely loved it.
I've been cautiously optimistic about Jurassic Park 4. Every movie since the original has been pretty much a letdown, even though there were some enjoyable parts to The Lost World. But the one thing that strikes me about this news is even though they said they were serious about Jurassic Park 4, they cast basically an unknown director. And if they really weren't intending this movie just to be a cash cow, you'd think that they would get someone who'd be more comfortable in this territory, like Joe Johnston. Why didn't they get Joe Johnston back? The one thing I do hope happens is that they get both Jeff Goldblum and Sam Neill back for this sequel, because having them on the screen together again would really bring a sense of familiarity.
And finally, the Red Band trailer for Kick-Ass 2 has just been released.
I've been really looking forward to this movie. I thought the first one was brilliant in how it pushed the boundaries in depicting acts of violence done by children. The one thing I do have to say about this trailer is it seems like they're revisiting some of the storyline from the original Kick-Ass, and I was kind of hoping that they would go a different direction and maybe set that back up for the third one, but I mean, other than that, it still looks really good.
I think it looks a little bit weird for me. Some of the funny things that Hit Girl would say are not as funny anymore because she's so much older and she looks so much older. And some of the visual effects were really terrible. Like, very, very bad. And so I know it doesn't have a huge budget like some of these other action movies, superhero movies, but I still think they could do a better job than that, and I'm gonna give it more like a cautiously optimistic. The Incredible Burt Wonderstone, directed by Don Scardino, stars Steve Carell, Steve Buscemi, Olivia Wilde, and Jim Carrey, about a disenchanted Las Vegas magician who loses the limelight to an up-and-coming and edgy street performer, which causes a strain between him and his oldest friend and partner, Anton Marvelton, but rediscovers his passion with the help of his childhood idol.
The Incredible Burt Wonderstone I found personally to be not so incredible. For me, most of the jokes fell completely flat, and at least for half the movie, I felt like the jokes themselves were predicated completely upon how obnoxious and self-absorbed, Steve Carell and these other magicians are, that it wasn't humorous, and in fact, it ended up becoming irritating.
I mean, there were some laugh-out-loud moments, though.
Yeah.
Not as many as you'd like, but there were some funny elements to the story, and I really enjoyed some of the sleight-of-hand jokes that they made. I was probably laughing for a few seconds.
There were some genuinely funny moments, but the operative word being some. And when throughout the movie the jokes are either making you feel irritated or the physical humor is making you feel uncomfortable, then I honestly don't think it really did its job. It didn't perform its artistic function as a comedy.
And something you can't deny about this movie is that everybody in it was really good, and everyone acted their part, and everyone was genuinely really funny, especially Steve Buscemi. I really liked him in this movie.
I did like the entire cast. I mean, they did very well for the material they were given, I thought. Although some people I felt were very underused, like Steve Buscemi basically disappeared through the entire movie. And they didn't do enough with Alan Arkin, who I think between him and Steve Buscemi really stole the show.
Oh, especially Alan Arkin. He was great as this just old curmudgeoned magician that kind of just left the limelight of Las Vegas.
Disenchanted.
Yeah, it was really, really funny. And Jay Moore was actually really funny as the comedic magician. And he was just making these really horrible, dry jokes that weren't actually funny, and nobody was laughing, and he was just talking to himself. That was funny, but it was more so because of the actor than really the writing and the comedy of the movie.
And as always, it's great to see Jim Carrey on screen, but he's another one that I think they didn't do enough with his character. I know he's supposed to be the antagonist in this picture, but they didn't do enough to balance that comedically. And again, he's another one who you just saw on screen and you felt irritated, and there was nothing, to me anyway, that felt remotely funny about his part, other than some of the physical things. But,
yeah, his physical humor was about the only thing that was funny about that.
Yeah. And Olivia Wilde was good too, but I don't know, a lot of her part was kind of a throwaway, and she was supposed to be, along with Alan Arkin's Rance Holloway, she was another one who was supposed to center Burt in his ways again, and to bring him back. But again,
it didn't really feel like at all that they needed her in the movie. At all. They just needed to throw a love interest in there just to have it.
Yeah.
Just to make that story seem as generic as possible.
There were some things about this story also that were to be enjoyed, that I found enjoyable. And you had the whole story with, about a man losing his way and having to become centered and, to use a pun, to find the magic again. But ultimately, you kind of did know where it was all ending up. And, I mean, you don't always go to a comedy to really see complete originality in that way. But, it didn't really feel like there were any stakes throughout the movie, I guess.
Yeah, it was a pretty predictable comedy.
You knew where it was heading in the end.
And yeah, the story was predictable, and it was simple, but I still really enjoyed the story just for the simple fact that it was so simple, and they didn't try to go over the top because it was a comedy.
I can just only go back to the fact that I sat there for an hour and 40 minutes, and I think I can count on one hand the instances in which I really was laughing at the screen.
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to give this a strong recommendation to rent. So there's enough to enjoy it to see it as a rent, but not to go see it in the movie theaters.
I think as a whole the movie is worth a watch and to rent. I just wish it were more funny than it was. I appreciated the concept, and I just thought it was executed poorly.
And if you like Cinecynics, rate, comment, and subscribe.
Check back every Saturday and throughout the week for more movie news, recommendations, and reviews.
Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Blogspot.
And the question we have for our viewers this week: what are your favorite movies starring either of the Steves?